Hello friends, and welcome to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video. This is Thaddeus from Going Nerdy, and today we are going to talk about 3 potential characters who could be introduced to players in the month of June. Now, back in April, if you recall, at Star Wars Celebration, players were told that 2 new fan-favorite characters would be introduced in the months of June and May. Now, we saw R2-D2 in a character event. For those of you who got to play, it was the Daring Droid event. I don't necessarily think that we're going to get a similar event like we got with the Daring Droid. If they do decide to go with a character event like Palpatine, like Yoda, like R2, it would make sense because then they could rotate those 3 events every 3 months. And so instead of having a back-to-back event like they've had with the Yoda and the Palpatine events, they could do a back-to-back-to-back-to-back event. And so every 3 months, these characters are still difficult to get, and they're still valuable characters. The fact that these are 3 fan-favorite characters makes me think that there's only a handful of characters that really fit that bill. But the very first character I want to talk about is Revan. Now, for those of you who don't know who Revan is, he was introduced in the video game Knights of the Old Republic. He was a Jedi who went to the Sith, who went back to the Jedi. One of the things that we were told back in April at Star Wars Celebration was that these characters would have abilities, or would have an ability that hadn't been in the game before. Now, we see that with R2-D2, with his fire ability. You know, what an ability that I would like to see Revan have is something like a dominate mind ability, something where he can control the mind of another character and on the other team. Additionally, since Revan was a Jedi to start off and then he became a Sith, went back to being a Jedi, it would be cool if he had the tag Jedi and Sith, and then he could play on both sides of the field. That would be really interesting because that's not something that we've seen, that's not a functionality that we've seen so far in the game, and it would also make both of those abilities both of those factions so much more viable and so much cooler to play, and it would expand quite a bit more. Now, the thing about Revan is he is an Old Republic character. Now, we don't have any other Old Republic characters yet, but if we introduced him as a Jedi or a Sith, we wouldn't need to give him the title Old Republic. In the future, when they do introduce the Old Republic, it would be simple to go ahead and just add that as an afterthought, an additional tag that he already had. Now, I do believe that Revan would be a leader. He would obviously have some strong leadership abilities. He was great with a saber. He was great with a force, and so I think that he would definitely have some strong force powers, and I think that his physical attacks would also be pretty devastating. My second is Jedi Luke. Now, I'm specifically looking at the Return of the Jedi Luke. This is also the character that we've seen on the recent commercials. If you've seen anything for any of the commercials for Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, Jedi Luke does show up. And so it is very much a possibility that he could be the June character. If Jedi Luke comes in, I think he's going to be very fast. I think he's going to have a high evade. I think he might even potentially have a counter chance. I think it would be cool to see him have a defense against the Empire, a defense against the Sith, right? Luke was able to withstand the temptation of falling to the dark side, so maybe he won't be affected by the dark side like every other character is. Maybe Palpatine's shock doesn't get him, or something to that extent, right? That would be kind of cool. Additionally, I think that like I said, I think he'll be fast. I would like to see him have an ability like Han's shoot first, where Luke, before anything happens, can take a single basic attack against maybe a Sith character, or maybe an Empire character. You know, something to that extent. He'll obviously be a rebel. He'll be a pilot. We'll see an X-Wing introduced with him. Whenever he comes in, we'll probably see an X-Wing or some kind of ship introduced with Luke. He'll definitely have an affinity with R2-D2. I think it's more likely that we'll see Luke than anyone else, simply because it's Luke. I mean, we haven't seen Jedi Luke. But what stops me, what makes me think that it's not going to be Luke, is we are 7 months away from The Last Jedi. And shortly before Rogue One, we got a bucket of characters that were in the movie that we are aware of, and then we got to learn more about the characters. I think we're going to see that again with The Last Jedi. We also saw it with The Force Awakens. And so I think what we're going to see is that Luke, and this is the reason I think that Luke is not going to be introduced in June. I think that we're going to see Luke introduced in the fall right before the movie, to get the movie hyped up, to get people really excited, as if they're not going to be excited anyway, about what's to come, because they're going to introduce his Force powers. Now, Luke is definitely going to have changed. Return of the Jedi Luke would definitely be not someone who's strong with the Force. It would be someone who has the Force, who can use the Force, who has an ability with the Force. I think the Luke that is going to be introduced is going to be strong with the Force. I think we're going to see a lot of really cool Force powers, and that's why I think we're holding off. I think they're using it as a hype machine, and I think that's why they're holding off. They're going to try to hype up The Last Jedi. Now, the character that I do think that we are going to get is Grand Admiral Thrawn. He was originally an EU character, and people loved him. Now, in the EU, I wasn't a huge fan of Thrawn. He wasn't my favorite character, and I think it was because the books didn't really focus entirely on Thrawn. They focused on a mix of stories, right? It was the EU Thrawn books were definitely an ensemble piece that involved a lot of different characters. Now, Thrawn is in Rebels, Season 3 of Rebels. He will be in Season 4 of Rebels. There was a book that just came out about Thrawn. Or I also think that Thrawn is going to play a major part in the time period between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. And I think that since he's going to have a big part, and since he's going to play a big role, they want to include him as quickly as possible. Now, another reason why I think that Thrawn is potentially going to be our June character is we just got a lot of Empire reworks. And people want to use their Empire teams. And what better way to do that than to introduce a new, strong leader like Thrawn. But I think he's going to be what Yoda is for the Jedi team. He's going to have very strong supporting, unique, or special abilities. Things like Yoda has that make him so valuable, but not necessarily as an attacker, but as a support character. He may have a strong leadership. It would make sense for Thrawn to have a strong leadership ability. But I also think that he's going to have some top-notch special and unique abilities as well. His basic attack will probably be fine and probably do the average amount of damage. Now, one of the drawbacks I think of Thrawn is going to simply be is the character himself is very methodical. And he's slow to action, but when he acts, it's devastating. So what I think we're going to see is a very slow character. I think his speed is going to be well below the average, and I think it might even be one of the slower characters. Now, you'll be able to put speed mods on him and other things to increase that, but I do think that he will be slow, methodical, very much like his character is in the books and the TV show. I think that he would definitely be detrimental against Rebel teams, specifically the Phoenix Squadron. With a lot of the changes that have happened to the game so far, it just makes sense for us to get a character like that. Now, these have just been my thoughts. What do you think? Who do you think that we're going to get? Who do you hope that we're going to get? There's a handful of other potential characters that we could get. We could see more Sith added. We could definitely see more droids added or more Separatists added. Personally, I'd love to see some more Separatists added. I want to see more Ewoks added. I'd love to see a full fleshed out Ewok team. And to be honest, I don't think we have enough First Order or Resistance characters, but I don't think that we're going to see those, like I said, until later on in the year, until closer to The Last Jedi. Leave a comment in the section below and tell us what you think. Who do you think that we're going to get, and who do you hope that we're going to get? Because those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. This has been Thaddeus from Going Nerdy, and as always, stay nerdy, my friend.